Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, where we bring the mind, body, and gym together so you can improve your health, increase performance, and live your best life. For more information, visit thinkfitnesslife.com. Here are your hosts, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie.
Welcome back, folks, to the Think Fitness Life podcast, Mindset, Exercise, and Nutrition. My name is Matt Gluckman with my co-host Eric Menchie, and today we're going to be talking about breathing, one of my favorite topics. I know it's one of Eric's favorite topics as well. We're going to define it and then go into some of the science behind some of the best breathing techniques, best breathing patterns you want to utilize for optimal health and to increase your performance in the gym. Before we get started, I always like to deliver our weekly workout, and we've been progressing this year. We're right along with you people who have been with us for some time, and then we're also being there for people who are just getting going this January. So we're moving up the ladder. We're climbing the difficulty ladder here. And what I got for you guys this week is a workout where you just want to spend 10-15 minutes warming up, take your time, get your heart rate up, move in different planes, make sure you have good mobility and good activation of your body before you get going, and don't rush it. I can't stress that enough. It's so important. The warm-up is so important so that A, you don't hurt yourself for this workout. 2, you're going to better receive the tension on your body in the proper areas that you want it, and C, the fact that you'll be able to recover well and be able to work out tomorrow as well. So after your warm-up, you're going to be doing an 8 set by 5 reps of a deadlift. Spend the first 2 sets finding that working weight. It's okay if for the first 2 sets to be a little light, but then the 6 sets after that should be at your working weight. Rest no more than 60 seconds between sets, and then you're going to spend the last set for reps. You're going to go all out, as many reps as you can do on that deadlift. Then you're going to go to your flat barbell press. I want you to really feel those shoulder blades on the bench. You're going to do another 8 by 5. Again, spend those first 2 sets finding that working weight. The next 6 sets at that working weight. Last set for reps. Rest 60 to 70 seconds between sets, and boom, you're done. Workout's over. Ideally, you do want to spend probably about 5-10 minutes cooling down. You can do like some side planks or some hamstring curls, but that's a solid workout. Get after it. And here we go with some breathing. So before I let Eric talk, because once he gets the microphone, I know he won't stop because he's just really good with breathing. And he's certified postural restoration, which is a whole course on teaching about the asymmetries of the body, teaching about breathing properly, teaching about pushing air down into your lower diaphragm there to keep that pelvic floor on. So I wanted to just define the 4 types of breathing. There's costal breathing, there's hyperpnea breathing, eupneic breathing, and diaphragmatic breathing. So the first one, costal breathing, is your intercostals. You can think of them kind of like the muscles in your neck that are pulling everything in. Same thing with your rib cage and your thorax. It's going to be pulling everything in and out to expand and contract your rib cage to help with breathing, which a lot of times that area can get tight. So this is a way of just, you can almost put your hands at the bottom of your rib cage and feel everything turning in or pulling in and out. So that's our costal breathing. It's much more shorter breathing, engaging the muscles of the thorax to help with that expansion and contraction. Eupneic breathing is just your passive breathing, more of normal, unlabored, sort of background, passive inhalation and exhalation. Hyperpnea breathing, and I'm sure I'm butchering that pronunciation, but it's the best I got for you guys, is when you're completely exhausted and you're gasping for air. You can think of the times when you're literally drawing in so much air than you normally do. We'll get back to those three in a second. The last one I wanted to say is the diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing, which involves a full engagement of the stomach, the abdominal muscles, the diaphragm, and this is going to be a breathing pattern that we're going to want to expand upon, pun intended. So I'll let Eric go ahead and take the microphone here as I get a sip of water and breathe.
That's right. So the first couple you mentioned, breathing's a universal thing. We all need to breathe. We all need to get oxygen into the system, CO2 out of the system for energy to live and so on. And through our patterning and positions that we go through in life, we can create different breathing patterns. So sometimes, ideally, diaphragmatic breathing is optimal. But in cases where we get out of position or out of posture, or we're stuck in certain patterns, then we might be going into more poor breathing mechanic patterns.
And I think the first place for anyone to start is just to have an awareness of this stuff. Just to start to pinpoint, oh, I'm breathing just with my chest, or oh, I'm breathing down into my belly, or wow, my breath is really rapid right now, or I'm just gasping for air, like sucking in wind right now. I think that is the first place for people to have just an awareness of their airflow and specifically their stomach. I feel like a lot of people have a hard time of feeling air being pulled in to the bottom of their chamber, so to speak.
I would say even air pulled in anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's the first part. I always have clients make sure, and they might not get this the first time, that they're starting to be aware of where air is going, where the rib cage is expanding, where their body is expanding. That will, as you go through, people might not get it the first or second time, but then you start feeling places where your body's expanding, and that's where you're starting to put air. Before we even get you in a certain position to put the air somewhere, can you feel air coming in? And then the next step is, as you feel air coming in, what else do you feel? Do you feel your neck muscles tightening up and pulling the rib cage up and pulling air in? Do you sense air coming through your mouth? Air coming through your nose? Where are you sensing air coming from on that inhale? And can you feel things expand? Maybe. If not, then there's different strategies going on in compensation to get that air in. And with that, usually stems poor posture, tight, soft tissue, tight muscles, and restrictions and limitations.
And now you go into whatever movement, be it a squat, a deadlift, a step up, a lunge, and poor breathing mechanics with load on your system. And now you're creating imbalances in the body and strengthening one side, keeping one side weaker. And then eventually it leads to unsustainability in the system and breakdown somewhere, whether that's injury or just constant aches and pains in a familiar area. Like you said, the first thing is that awareness piece. And I remember the first time we did a podcast on breathing, it was in the first season. And that was the first episode that we got so many people reaching out because they loved that episode. And we talked about the dead bug. And the dead bug, for those of you who don't know, is just when you lay on your back, you have arms and legs reached up to the ceiling. Your knees are at a 90-degree bend, so your knees are pointing straight up, your hands are pointing up. And then as you take a right arm and a left leg, or a left arm and a right leg extending away from yourself, away from your center point, you're exhaling so that you learn to control your core during an exhale. And that's another piece, is like some people might have that awareness, but now how much energy do they have to deliberately focus on that breathing pattern, and it now takes away from them performing anything else. Or when they go to exhale, it's like a disassociation. It's like a complete let go and lose proper form.
And that's where usually we see a lot of stuff going wrong. Before you even get into a movement, they can maintain that position, static position. And then as soon as arms and legs go to move, hips or scaps, they are not able to maintain that position, that load on the system. Now, there's no external weight, But with breathing, we have a pressure as we inhale and exhale. We're creating different pressures, positive and negative pressures throughout the system, because our systems have to balance with the outside pressure of the air. So people can't regulate that first off. I'm not saying you should never. It's really not advisable to really start loading the system heavy with weight if they can't manage internal pressures and internal positions of ribcage, because then a lot of things starts to shift and move because they can't maintain that in positions under load. But kind of giving back to your dead bug is, as soon as you start to move arms and legs and hips, remember, internally we have organs moving, fluids moving, and then there's air. And as we're moving arms away, we exhale. We're using our abdominals, which are respiratory muscles. Your abs are there not for show. They'll flex the trunk, but there are exhalation muscles that are setting the rib cage in a position for you able to sustain load and protect your system. And then as you exhale and drop the rib cage down and out, you should feel those muscles engaged so you get proper movement with arms and legs going forward. And I say, if you want to start with just maybe a respiratory dead bug, you're not even moving arms and legs. You're just in that dead bug position, reaching. Inhale, can you fill the upper chest with air? Exhale and engage those abs as you exhale. And then the next portion, the next inhale, that's where a lot of people start to lose it, because they inhale and they want to go to a poor breathing pattern. They want to just go to a lower rib cage belly breathing pattern or costal pattern or whatever you want to. Could be even apnea, where they're like gasping for air because their system doesn't know what to do under tension and pressure on an exhale. So to be able to maintain a short inhale to get air in, creating that position, then exhaling again, that's going to help tell your system, okay, hey, you can breathe in that position. Air is going to go somewhere else than you want it. And most of the time you've seen these hyperextended, these extended positions where people are more breathing through lower rib cages, more of the stomach, and not getting complete full expansion, front, side, and back of the rib cage.
And that's why I love, you used the word one time, I remember at Equinox, a cylinder. And it's so true. And my cue for a lot of clients is just like, think you have an internal corset, something that every time you exhale, you're pulling that string in. And when you exhale, and then when you inhale, you're still holding on to that string. Because just like you said, people will go back to that costal breathing in the dead bug when they go to inhale again, like just completely let go of their core. And then sometimes, like you said, a couple times they do a few and then they're like, oh, they're gasping for air. Now they're back at the hyperpnea breathing to just draw in extra oxygen, when it's more of drilling that movement so that you can keep that pressure, that pressurization in your core during the inhale and the exhale. And a big piece of that is controlling your core, your center of mass. Your arms, your legs are your appendages, and when you can't control the most medial part of your body from top to bottom and left to right, then you're going to risk injury. And it's a great analogy of firing a cannon out of a canoe. If that canoe is not anchored, that canoe or that cannon is going haywire, and who knows how, like, where it's headed and how even far it's going to go, compared to if that boat is anchored, that canoe is anchored, and now that cannon fires, it's going to be much more sturdy, much stronger, and you're going to get the performance out of your system that you're looking for when you can control that medial side or medial part of the body.
And that can be seen a lot in any position, standing, seated, supine, but you'll see it a lot in the supine position when someone goes to really contract their abs and then take another exhale. Kind of watch to see what their body does. They might panic a little bit. They might try to figure out, how do I get air in while keeping my abs on? And that's performance and health. You want to be able to breathe while keeping that cylinder in a spot of position. So that also means that when our ribs are in we'll call it more of a neutral position, when that diaphragm domes up and comes back down, I know that that's proper diaphragmatic movement. And that's what we mean by diaphragmatic breathing, is when you inhale, the diaphragm flattens
Pushing
out
that
and it
air
expands
down.
the rib cage.
Yeah.
And then when you exhale, it domes back up. And of course, now it's also working with the pelvic diaphragm at the same time as you're moving air and moving fluid in organs in positions. And when you see those low ribs come up, that means that diaphragm's pulling, but it's pulling the spine forward. It's pulling the rib cage out in a way. So that shows, okay, maybe they can't get air into their upper chest. If they're on their back, it's going to be hard because you're compressing the back. But if they're in a front plank or a side plank, that might mean they can't push air posteriorly and expand their back. And what that tells us as coaches and shows is that breathing patterns can also limit movement. So if you can't expand in the back, are you going to get appropriate external rotation? If you can't expand in the front, are you going to get humeral internal rotation?
Yeah.
So it's almost the
proper movement pattern.
Exactly.
To your lifts. Yeah.
So breathing goes a long way with setting positions, setting patterns of the system, but also we want it to be when you're just sitting there, not working out. When you're sitting at your desk, we want good ventilation and perfusion. So we need oxygen to get into the system. We need it to mix. We need the lungs to fill up with air and transfer it into the blood so we can feel good. A lot of times these poor breathing patterns put us in positions where we limit that. One side is not getting enough oxygen. Parts of the lungs aren't even being used. There's a lot of dead space in the lungs because of the inability to expand the rib cage. So if people are only breathing through lower rib cages or sides, they're never really filling the top parts of the lungs. And that becomes dead space, and that dead space not used is dying cells. So it's very important to be in different positions while you're breathing, hence why working out is very good, and make sure that you're pumping the diaphragm back and forth appropriately.
Yeah. No, there's this topic is very dense, and this podcast seems a lot more in depth than our normal ones. So I just want to take a short little break just to switch gears here for a second, let people kind of cool down for a second, let their brains rest. And I just want to mention that we have a Facebook group going where we got a little community going of a lot of our listeners and clients and friends and family, and just people helping people, promoting good information and encouragement and progress. And so please find us on Facebook, Think Fitness Life, join our group, join our community, and start making the movement happen today. So let's go ahead and get back into it. I think the other area that I want to highlight for kind of the issue side of things before we start talking about solutions and some of the better ways to breathe and some of the science behind it is the idea of, and I know I've said this a little bit before, but I think it's just so important to pay mind to the exhalation under load. I think a lot of times, and I've fallen into the habit of using so much energy for my exhale, and it's just not that efficient versus more of a passive exhale. Keep that core tight, save that energy for the next rep, or maybe you can add another rep at the end of this set, or maybe you can add another rep to your final set when you go for reps. And I think that's an important piece too, is like as you're learning this stuff, it is almost like the way to stress it and make it more impacted into your passive or your autonomic nervous system is to really deliberately focus on it all the time. But then there has to be a way that you progress to a more passive, effective inhalation, exhalation with diaphragmatic breathing. So I just want to mention that because I think it's important as another stepping stone to think about. Like, you don't always want to be doing these that shouldn't be every rep. It should be much more passive and require less energy, and thus saving more energy for the work.
And sometimes things that might not even be with lifting. Sometimes people are walking around like that, hyperinflated and only exhaling minimally, getting a little air out. So that means that the next inhale, let's just say, okay, as you exhale, maybe that was 40%. There's still 60% of air left in your system because you're not getting a full exhale. So then you inhale, and this is where this,
But you
like,
think you're
dead
getting a full exhale
space,
because it's so loud.
and then you have this stale air just kind of sitting in your system. Systems becomes hyperinflated. Here, then hyperinflation leads to fight or flight, sympathetic drive. So now you're telling your body, we're on the go. We're going. And if this kind of relates into, let's say, all day, that means your sympathetic system is running. Cortisol might be up, your adrenals might be up, because your body thinks it's in a fight or flight situation because of the breathing position you're putting in. And then that alone, that breathing pattern, sympathetics, drives tension. It drives tone throughout the brain, the body, the systems. People start feeling tight. They become whatever positions they want to be, hyperextended, extended, forward head posture. They start getting stiffness, tightness around, because their autonomic nervous system is just producing tone, because it's going, this is what I need to do to survive right now. So I'm very glad you brought that up, is a mindful exhale during the day, throughout the day. Even if you take 5 to 10 minutes, 3-4 times a day, and really get a mindful long exhale, you're going to set your system, you're going to turn the dial down to parasympathetic, you're going to relax the system, but you're going to get better oxygen and inflow. CO2 is going to come out, oxygen is going to come in, you're just going to feel better. And that's taking that stuff, you can apply that into the gym. There'll be times where I need you, if you're doing a heavy back squat, I need you to get sympathetic. I need you to jack it up. But I don't need you to do it when you're doing bicep curls, lighter weights. I don't need you, not getting air in. Certain exercises you can, and then I can pair something off and, hey, let's tone it down, let's relax, but really keep that position.
And this perfectly segues into kind of the first piece that I want to mention about some of the studies around breathing that they've shown for performance. And back to that piece about, like, I want you to get sympathetic for a squat. We also want you to be a cold, calculated killer, so you can just keep going. And it's like that, you got to think of people in the military. They don't want their heart rate to constantly increase in those high stressful moments. They want that heart rate to stay calm so they can make a clear, best decision in that moment. So with the exhales, this is back to some of the studies that they've shown, is that during the exhalation, blood moves out of the lungs, out of the vessels of the lungs, which causes a slight increase in the systematic blood pressure, and then your nervous system reflexively decreases the heart rate and dilates the blood vessel, and that's actually a parasympathetic response. So using the long exhales takes advantage of that reflex, and the longer exhales, specifically through your nasal cavity, will increase the nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide production will increase your lungs' capacity to better absorb oxygen. So when you're focusing on your breathing, it's focusing on drawing air and pushing it down into the diaphragm to get that full chamber, and then it's a slower exhalation through the nasal cavity. That's going to be the best thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
Sustained performance.
Mm-hmm. Or sustained performance, you could call sustained performance life, longevity.
Yeah.
Essentially, there's technique where you can tape your mouth shut and just do a workout through nasal breathing. That's a very beneficial thing. It actually can increase a lot of different exercise capacity things. But I'm glad you also brought up the nose. People don't understand, like, yes, we're talking diaphragms, we're talking abdominals, but the nose and the airway are important, because a lot of people will be mouth breathers, and they'll take in air intake through the mouth, and the mouth does not filter air. It doesn't filter any particles, and mouth breathing drives poor posture. So when we're starting to breathe in,
the neck, you recruit the anterior neck and the chest.
Exactly. So now you start pulling the neck muscles up, and that influences the rib cage, and intercostals get off. It's just not ideal.
It might even lead to tightness in your neck. Yeah.
Well, they've also found increased cases of asthma because of mouth breathers, a part of the filter, all this stuff. So nose breathing is very important. And we have sinuses, we have we have turbines behind our nose in our structure that filter and move the air. And that's very important. It moistens the air, warms the air before it gets into our system. It's okay to exhale through the mouth. That is fine. But if you're a person who is very into mouth breathing, try to be cognizant and aware of that. Okay, can I get more influence through nasal breathing? And that obviously plays a role with autonomics. But I do highly tell people it's going to be uncomfortable first. Maybe not pick a crazy day. Take some tape.
Yeah, pick
tape
like a
the mouth
low
shut.
conditioning day,
Yeah.
like a 60, 70%.
And kind of go through that. At first, you'll get uncomfortable because you want to breathe through
You're
your
going to feel
mouth.
like you're right,
But then
suffocating.
Then you realize that it's going to open your nasal pathways and all that stuff, and you'll adapt to it. And it's actually a really good tool to use.
Yeah, I think that about wraps it up for the points on breathing, at least the ones I got. Probably the only other thing I think is pretty interesting is we talk about the efficiency of slowing down your heart rate. We talk about the efficiency of slowing down your respiration rate. We talk about the efficiency of getting the most absorption out of each breath. And that's another reason for performance and longevity to control your breathing patterns, make it efficient, and slow it down.
If breathing patterns go unchecked, and there's multiple, a lot of the big ones that are taught and through PRI, we have our right side's a little more dominant. So our right diaphragm and left diaphragm are two different things. They're not symmetrical. So the right side's in better position. So that kind of torques in the body. So a big goal of people I have is, okay, get expansion in the right rib cage, the left upper back to expand with air, feel those expand with left abs on. And that's a good starting point because the body is built off of asymmetry. So I think people, yes, we have the cylinder, which is good, but it never functions directly the same on each side. So we have two different sides, the left and right. And that's where these patterns that Matt is telling us get created. And if you stay in these patterns and breathe like that, you can create some serious issues through the lungs, through the diaphragm. And we've talked about asthma. You can talk about dying tissues of the lung because it's not getting oxygenated, all that kind of stuff because of, oxidation and all that stuff that goes through the body. And this is something that the diaphragm contracts 22 to 24,000 times a day. That's a lot. That's a lot of influence in the system. So to be able to understand how it moves, how it works, and that we're naturally out of position. I don't think anyone is like naturally a good breather because we're built off of patterns. That's how we're designed. That's how we were born. It's understanding the patterns and then controlling it, taking those steps, say, okay, I'm recognizing my patterns. I know my patterns. What do I need to do to set my system so my patterns can turn off and turn on? Because patterns are good and bad. Everyone needs to understand that we have these tendencies not to breathe optimally. But now with science and studies and all these teachings, we now understand that breathing is different. And it's different for women. It's different for men. There's this big there's a difference. It's kind of cool. Like organisms, women and men are different. We're now in science starting to understand that they're a lot different than we thought. Same build, but mechanically a little bit different. Brains, breathing. So it's fascinating. And once you can kind of control that and understand that, I think it leads to a better, healthier life. I mean, you've mentioned Wim Hof, his breathing techniques and his ability to control his breathing is huge. There's a bunch of other people out there that will teach breathing, whether it's high performance for athletes to inhale, long, slow exhale, and literally say the word relax and then make a decision. The military uses breathing to slow heart rates down. It's really a good thing to turn down autonomics. And I think that's a main thing I use it in my profession is how do I dial someone down really quick? Breathing. Meditate. Like I would say meditation, but even just focusing on a inhale for 4 seconds and exhale for 5 seconds and then pause, don't breathe, and then repeat that 3 or 4 times. That can change your autonomic nervous system really quick.
Yeah, it's like kind of back to our episode we did last time about the comfort zone. And in actuality, the flip side of that coin is usually we breathe and live away from our comfort zone, and it's okay to come back to that space and then go back out and do your thing, because you want your system to have a neutrality and have a safe point, not just feel like it needs to run until you crash at the end of the day. And I have a good quote to end on here, unless you have more you want to say. Are we good?
I think there's always more we could say about breathing, but
we'll save it for another year.
Because this is a good place to stop today.
Yeah, I agree. So this quote comes from Etty Hillesum, who was a Dutch author, and she was killed in the Auschwitz concentration camps. The quote is, "Sometimes the most important thing in a whole day is the rest we take between two deep breaths." Boom. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Find us on Facebook. Check out our website for more information. Peace.
If you're ready to make steps towards improving your health or increasing your performance, book a free 30-minute call today by visiting thinkfitnesslife.com.